In 1503, Leonardo da Vinci declined a marriage proposal from a Florentine noblewoman with the explanation, "I have no time for anything but art." This response was not the arrogance of a genius, but a profound understanding of a truth that modern society is still not ready to acknowledge: human energy is finite, and greatness demands absolute focus. This decision leads us to a fundamental question: why do those who make the greatest contributions to humanity often choose a solitary path? And more importantly, is this choice incidental, or is it a prerequisite for greatness? To understand why a single life is optimal for some, we must begin with a concept modern psychology calls finite emotional energy. Each day, we have a certain amount of mental energy. The question is not whether we should use this energy, but how we will allocate it. When Leonardo said he had no time for anything but art, he was describing a psychological phenomenon we now call cognitive switching cost. Every time the brain must shift its focus from one task to another, we lose a portion of our precious mental energy. Charles Darwin understood this instinctively. He designed his life around protecting his mental energy. He had a private thinking path in his garden, a well-trodden trail he walked every day to ponder. His wife, Emma, was instructed never to distract him while he was on this path. It was on that solitary path that he formulated the theory of evolution. Darwin understood that the greatest breakthroughs require complete, uninterrupted concentration, free from any social task, no matter how small. In a romantic relationship, this happens constantly. You are immersed in a creative idea but must stop to listen to your partner's account of their workday. You are in a state of flow with your work but must pause to decide what to eat for dinner. These seemingly harmless interruptions accumulate, creating a devastating effect that few recognize: the fragmentation of genius. This does not mean that love is evil or harmful. The issue is that love, by its nature, demands sharing time, sharing mental space, sharing emotional energy. And for those with aspirations to create or change the world at a high level, this sharing can become the greatest obstacle to realizing their potential. Neuroscience has shown that the brain operates in two primary modes: the focused mode and the diffuse mode. The focused mode allows us to solve specific problems, while the diffuse mode, activated when we are in a relaxed, undistracted state, is where true creative breakthroughs occur. The problem is that the diffuse mode requires complete silence. It cannot function when there is any social task, however minimal. And in a romantic relationship, there is always a social task, even if it's just being aware of the other person's presence and adjusting one's behavior accordingly. Isaac Newton is a perfect example of the power of enforced solitude. He lived in almost complete isolation during the years 1665 to 1666, when Cambridge University closed due to the Great Plague. During this period of enforced solitude at his family farm, he developed calculus, his theory of light and color, and the initial ideas for the law of universal gravitation. Newton himself later called these his annus mirabilis, miraculous years, the most creative period of his life. It is noteworthy that these monumental contributions came not from collaboration or discussion with others, but from absolute focus in a completely quiet environment. This is precisely why the greatest geniuses in history often had remarkably solitary habits. It was not because they were misanthropic, but because they understood that true creation demands a mental monopoly. Analyzing this issue more deeply, we see that the problem lies not just in time allocation, but in a more subtle psychological phenomenon: the transformation of identity from I to we. When we enter a long-term relationship, an irreversible psychological process begins. Psychologists call this identity fusion. At first glance, this seems positive. It creates connection, understanding, and empathy. But there is a dark side that is rarely discussed. In this process of fusion, the sharpest edges of individuality, the very source of uniqueness and genius, are gradually worn down. This happens not out of malice, but because of the very nature of cohabitation. To maintain harmony, we automatically adjust our more extreme opinions, our stranger hobbies, our bolder dreams. We learn to self-censor thoughts that might cause disagreement. Gradually, we become an easier-to-live-with version of ourselves. Imagine you are a musician with a penchant for experimental music, but your partner prefers classical. You don't have to completely abandon your interest, but you will automatically adjust to find common ground. The result? The music you create is no longer entirely yours. Carl Jung understood this phenomenon when he developed the concept of individuation, the process of becoming the most complete human being you can be. Jung asserted that this process must necessarily take place in solitude, because only when free from the pressure to conform to someone else can we discover and develop the deepest aspects of ourselves. Emily Dickinson embodied this understanding perfectly. She lived as a near recluse for the last 30 years of her life, rarely leaving her father's house. But in that solitude, she wrote nearly 1,800 poems, works considered revolutionary in American poetry. She wrote, "I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody, too? Then there's a pair of us." Dickinson understood that being nobody in the eyes of society was the condition for becoming somebody in her art. Solitude was not a punishment but a privilege, an opportunity to explore the depths of the soul that social life often conceals. Modern research on couple psychology has confirmed Jung's intuition. Couples tend to become more similar over time, not just in their interests, but in their ways of thinking and seeing the world. This creates comfort and stability, but it also means that both individuals sacrifice a part of their uniqueness to achieve that similarity. For those with high creative potential, this is a silent catastrophe. Because creativity, by its nature, demands difference, uniqueness, and a willingness to go against the grain. When these traits are gradually eroded to serve relational harmony, the ability to make truly groundbreaking contributions is weakened along with them. However, the stability of a relationship harbors another dangerous paradox that few recognize. There is a strange psychological phenomenon: the happiest people in relationships are often the least likely to leave them. Not because they love their partner so much, but because stability has slowly caused their muscle of independence to atrophy to the point where they no longer believe in their ability to stand on their own. This is the most dangerous trap of stability. It creates a psychological dependency where, even if the relationship no longer serves your growth, you cannot leave. Observing this through a biological lens, we see that when a body does not use a function for a long time, that function atrophies. The same thing happens with psychological capabilities. When you have someone who always shares your emotional burdens, is always there to comfort you when you're sad, and always offers an opinion when you're confused, your ability to self-regulate emotions, to self-soothe, and to make your own decisions slowly weakens. Research on emotional co-regulation has shown that couples tend to develop interdependent emotional regulation systems. This creates short-term stability but leads to a dangerous long-term consequence: each person becomes less capable of handling stress and challenges on their own. This is why many people in long-term relationships experience a sense of panic at the thought of being alone. It's not because they lack love, but because they have lost the ability to effectively love and care for themselves. Conversely, a single person is forced to develop a strong self-regulation system. They must learn to comfort themselves in times of sadness, motivate themselves in times of failure, and make decisions in times of confusion. This process, though sometimes painful, builds a kind of psychological strength that those in stable relationships rarely have the opportunity to develop. There is a profound paradox here: the people with the strongest ability to be alone are often the most capable of creating the highest quality relationships. Because they come to a relationship from a position of fullness, not neediness. They don't need another person to save or complete them, but simply to share the abundance they already possess. Another fascinating aspect of the single life that few recognize is the ability to experience emotions with significantly greater nuance and intensity. One of the most common misconceptions about being single is that it lacks emotional intensity. People often think that the absence of romantic love means living an emotionally bland life. But recent neuroscience has revealed the opposite. Ludwig van Beethoven demonstrated this painfully yet beautifully. He wrote in his journal, "I can have no friends. I must live alone. But I know that God is nearer to me than to others in my art." In his final years, completely deaf and living in near total isolation from the world, he composed his greatest masterpieces, such as the Ninth Symphony. Solitude did not impoverish his emotions, on the contrary, it allowed him to access depths of feeling that few can ever reach. To understand this phenomenon, we need to explore the brain's emotional bandwidth. Like internet bandwidth, our capacity to process emotions is limited. When the brain must constantly monitor and respond to another person's emotions, which happens automatically in an intimate relationship, a significant portion of this bandwidth is occupied, reducing the capacity to focus on one's own emotional experience. Imagine you are listening to a symphony. If you are alone, your entire attention can be devoted to feeling every note, every emotional nuance the music conveys. But if you are listening with a partner, a part of your brain will automatically monitor their reaction. Do they like it? Are they bored? Do they want to leave? This sharing, while it can create its own joy, also significantly reduces the depth of the individual experience. Studies on meditation and special states of consciousness have shown that the most profound emotional experiences occur when the mind is completely focused and undistracted. This explains why many artists, writers, and philosophers have their greatest creative moments in complete solitude. Furthermore, when you live alone, you are forced to develop a richer emotional vocabulary. Instead of being able to rely on another person to understand and interpret your feelings, you must explore the subtle nuances of your inner state on your own. This process creates a kind of emotional intelligence that those who constantly share their feelings with others rarely have the chance to develop. There is an interesting phenomenon that psychologists call emotional co-regulation. In a long-term relationship, two people tend to synchronize their emotional states. This creates a sense of harmony and connection, but it also means that the range of emotions each person experiences is limited by the emotional range of the other. If one person in the couple tends to be subdued, the other will gradually curb their more exuberant expressions. If one avoids deep emotions, the other will automatically adjust to fit. The result is that both live in a narrower emotional safe zone than their actual capacity allows. The single person has no such constraints. They can experience their full emotional spectrum from moments of elation to deep contemplation without worrying about the impact on another person. This not only makes life richer but also creates the optimal conditions for creativity and self-discovery. This is why many great works of art were created during an artist's periods of solitude. Not because they were sad or lovelorn, but because they could access depths of emotion that, in daily life with another, they rarely had the chance to explore. Understanding the limitations of shared identity and the benefits of maintaining emotional integrity, we can begin to see the true power of the single life. It is not a deficiency or a flaw to be fixed, but an optimal state for achieving the absolute integrity of the self. Nietzsche captured this idea when he wrote, "A man must know how to conserve himself, the hardest test of independence." He understood that conserving oneself was not about physical safety, but about maintaining the integrity of one's soul, intellect, and personal vision. When you live completely with yourself, something magical happens. You can develop every aspect of yourself to its fullest extent without worrying about judgment or the impact on others. You can pursue ideas that are too bold and might worry someone else. You can experiment with lifestyles that might inconvenience a loved one. You can be completely authentic to your deepest aspirations, which others might not understand. This does not mean becoming selfish or uncaring. On the contrary, it is about understanding that to make the most powerful contribution to the world, you must sometimes refuse to make smaller contributions to specific individuals. Virginia Woolf demonstrated this understanding when she wrote, "A woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write fiction." She was not just talking about a physical space, but a mental space, a place where one can exist in one's true nature, uninfluenced by the expectations, needs, or emotions of others. In this space, She created works that revolutionized modern literature, works that would have been very difficult to produce if she had to constantly adjust her artistic vision to suit a husband, children, or societal expectations of a wife's role. This is precisely what the modern single person has the opportunity to achieve, the complete freedom to become the best, strongest, most creative version of themselves. They don't have to compromise on their dreams to fit a we plan. They don't have to share their emotional energy to maintain harmony in a relationship. They can invest it all in developing their talents, pursuing their passions, and making meaningful contributions. Once personal integrity is achieved, a significant psychological shift occurs. Instead of living to satisfy the needs of one specific person, you begin to live to satisfy the needs of the wider world. Instead of focusing on pleasing one person, you focus on creating value for thousands, or millions. Nikola Tesla understood this when he said, "I do not think there is any thrill that can go through the human heart like that felt by the inventor as he sees some creation of the brain unfolding to success. Such emotions make a man forget food, sleep, friends, love, everything." Tesla was not unfeeling or incapable of love. He simply understood that love for humanity could be more powerful and meaningful than love for an individual. Marie Curie demonstrated this painfully but fiercely. After her husband Pierre's death in 1906, she refused all marriage proposals to focus entirely on her scientific research. She told a friend, "Pierre lies in his final sleep under the earth, it is a beautiful end to a beautiful life. As for me, I want to finish the work we started together." From this decision, she became the first woman to win a Nobel Prize and the only person to win a Nobel in two different scientific fields. Curie understood that her scientific contributions could save and improve the lives of millions, a higher and broader form of love than any personal relationship. When you don't have to share your vision with anyone, when you don't have to explain or justify your bold decisions, when you can focus completely on realizing your potential, you become capable of making contributions that a person living in a traditional relationship would find very difficult to achieve. Research on successful entrepreneurs and innovators has shown a clear pattern. Their periods of highest productivity often coincide with periods when they had the fewest personal attachments. It's not that they were incapable of maintaining relationships, but that they understood that to create something truly significant, they needed all the energy they had. This leads us to a crucial realization: the single life is not a deficit of love, but a choice about the type of love you want to pursue. You can choose the narrow but deep love for one person, or you can choose the broad love for making meaningful contributions to the world. Neither choice is morally superior. But for those born with the capacity to create breakthroughs, great works of art, or life-changing inventions, choosing the second path may be the way for them to most fully realize their purpose for existing. Coco Chanel expressed this understanding when she said, "In order to be irreplaceable, one must always be different." And it was she who also proved, "I don't do fashion. I am fashion." Chanel understood that to become an icon, to create fundamental changes in how the world viewed women and fashion, she needed to maintain her absolute uniqueness. Any compromise, any adjustment to fit in with another person, could have dimmed the revolutionary vision she brought. In the modern world, where for the first time in history people have enough economic and social freedom to truly choose their way of life, we are witnessing the emergence of a new group, singles by conscious choice. These individuals are not waiting for the one to appear. They are not focusing on their career first. They have made a calculated decision that a single life with all its challenges and accompanying social pressures is still the optimal path for them to reach their full potential. This decision requires a special kind of courage. Because it means giving up the emotional safety of belonging to someone, giving up the social validation of being normal, giving up the simple joys of sharing daily life with a loved one. In return, they receive what Leonardo da Vinci, Virginia Woolf, Tesla, and countless other geniuses received: the opportunity to become the most complete, powerful, and creative version of themselves. The opportunity to live not for one person, but for the whole world. This is not a path for everyone. The world needs diversity. It needs people who choose family, as well as those who choose a vocation. It needs people who live for personal love, as well as those who live for love of humanity. But for those with the ability and aspiration to make extraordinary contributions to the world, a single life is not a backup plan. It is the optimal strategy for achieving greatness. And in a world that is increasingly complex, a world that needs creative breakthroughs to solve its great problems, we need people courageous enough to choose this path. We need people who understand that sometimes, the greatest love you can give the world is to refuse to share yourself with anyone. As Leonardo da Vinci lay on his deathbed, he did not regret having refused that marriage proposal years ago. Instead, he looked back on a life that had given the world immortal masterpieces, the Mona Lisa, the Last Supper, ingenious inventions, scientific studies hundreds of years ahead of their time. Could those contributions have existed if he had chosen the path of traditional marriage? Would humanity have inherited that priceless legacy if his creative energy had been dissipated in maintaining a family? The obvious answer shows us that some people are born to live for the world, not just for one person. In our current era, as society has finally created the conditions that allow people true freedom to choose their lives, we are witnessing the rise of a new generation. They do not fear solitude. They do not need external validation. They understand that completeness comes from within. These people are not waiting for someone suitable. They are not focusing on their career first. They have found what most people search for their entire lives: peace with themselves. They have understood the lesson that Nietzsche and Jung tried to teach, that true happiness comes not from finding the perfect person, but from becoming the perfect version of oneself. The world needs diversity. It needs those who choose family and those who choose a calling. It needs those who live for romantic love and those who live for the love of art, science, or humanity. But the world also needs those with enough courage to stand up and say, "I am enough. I lack nothing. I don't need anyone else to complete me, because I am already whole from the inside out." These people are the pioneers of a new era, an era in which a person's value is not measured by the relationship they have, but by the contribution they make. An era in which maturity is defined not by finding a better half, but by becoming a whole individual. If you are reading these lines and feel a deep resonance, if you have ever felt that being single is not a lack but a choice, if you understand that there are things more important than having someone by your side, then you are not alone. You are part of this silent revolution. You are part of the first generation in history with enough freedom to truly choose your life. And that choice, whether to continue the journey alone or to find someone worthy of sharing your fullness with, will come from a place of strength, not weakness. From completeness, not deficiency. From love for yourself, not from the fear of being alone. That is the ultimate legacy Nietzsche wished to leave, a world where human beings are finally strong enough to stand on their own, and from that strength, create miracles. Welcome to the age of the whole human being.